At my grandson's christening, my daughter sat me in the back and said, "You only came because you paid for the party." The next day, I transferred the property she thought she'd inherit. She was shocked when she found out who did. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I never imagined that my grandson's baptism would become the moment I finally understood how little I meant to my own daughter, 70 years on this earth, and I still believed that family meant something sacred. How naive I was. The morning started like any other Sunday, except my hands trembled as I chose my best dress, the navy blue one with small white flowers that I'd worn to Azalea's wedding 12 years ago. I wanted to look perfect for little Gabriel's special day, my first grandchild, the light of my life for these past 8 months. I arrived at St. Mary's Cathedral 30 minutes early, clutching the small gift bag containing the silver cross I'd bought for Gabriel. It wasn't expensive, but I'd saved for 3 months to afford it, the same way I'd saved for everything else in Azalea's life. Her quinceañera, her college tuition, her wedding, this very baptism celebration. The church was beautifully decorated with white lilies and baby's breath. Azalea had spared no expense, and I felt proud knowing I'd contributed to making this day special. What I didn't expect was where she planned to seat me. "Mom, you're over there." Azalea's voice was crisp, professional, like she was directing a stranger. She pointed toward the very back of the church, where a few scattered chairs sat behind the last pew. I stared at the spot, confused. "But sweetie, I can barely see from there." "It's fine. You'll see everything you need to see." She was already turning away, her attention on Marcus's family filing into the front rows. His mother wore a designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. I walked slowly to my assigned seat, my kitten heels clicking against the marble floor. Around me, Marcus's relatives chatted in clusters, their jewelry catching the morning light streaming through stained glass windows. They glanced at me briefly, politely, then looked away. I was clearly not part of their world. The ceremony was beautiful. I watched my daughter hold Gabriel, his tiny face peaceful in the white christening gown I'd embroidered by hand during countless evenings. My eyes filled with tears of joy and something else, a deep ache I couldn't quite name. After the service, everyone moved to the parish hall for the reception. I followed the crowd, hoping to hold Gabriel, to be part of the celebration I'd helped fund. The hall was transformed with elegant table settings, fresh flowers, and a 3-tier cake that must have cost a fortune. That's when I noticed the seating arrangement. My name wasn't at the family table where Azalea sat with Marcus and his parents. It wasn't even at the second table with close relatives. I found my place card at a small table near the kitchen door, next to the church's elderly custodian and a woman I didn't recognize. "Carmen Esperanza Rodriguez," I read aloud, my voice barely a whisper. "You looking for your seat, dear?" The custodian, a kind man named Frank, smiled sympathetically. "We're the background folks, I guess." I sat down heavily, my purse clutched in my lap like a shield. From here I could barely see Azalea's table. When the toasts began, I strained to hear Marcus's father praising the wonderful family we're so blessed to join. No mention of me, of course. The breaking point came during the cake cutting. I watched Azalea pose for photos with Gabriel, her radiant smile directed at the professional photographer she'd insisted on hiring. Marcus's mother stood beside her, already looking every inch the doting grandmother she planned to be. I stood up, thinking perhaps I could approach, maybe ask to hold Gabriel for just a moment. But as I took a step forward, I heard Azalea's voice carry across the room. "Oh, she's here because she paid for half the party," Azalea was telling someone, her tone casual, almost dismissive. "I mean, she wanted to contribute, so we let her." The words hit me like ice water. Let her. As if my contribution was charity she'd graciously accepted, not the sacrifice it actually was. I stood frozen in the middle of the hall, surrounded by laughter and celebration, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. This wasn't about money. This was about respect, about love, about being seen as more than just a wallet with legs. Slowly, I walked back to my table, picked up my purse, and headed for the exit. No one noticed me leave. Why would they? I was just the woman who paid for the party. As I reached my old Honda in the parking lot, something inside me shifted. For 70 years, I'd accepted being overlooked, taken for granted, treated as an afterthought. I'd told myself it was normal, that children grow up and move on. But this wasn't about growing up. This was about fundamental respect. I sat in my car for a long moment, staring at the church where my grandson had just been baptized. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. There was a call I needed to make, one I'd been putting off for months. Something had changed in me during that humiliating hour. The woman who'd entered that church was gone. The one driving away had work to do. The drive home from the baptism felt different. Every familiar street, every turn toward my modest apartment, seemed to echo with the weight of what I'd just endured. But instead of the usual hurt that would send me to bed with a cup of tea and wounded feelings, I felt something new brewing inside me. Clarity. I parked in my usual spot and climbed the 2 flights of stairs to my apartment, each step deliberate. Once inside, I didn't even change out of my good dress. Instead, I sat at my small kitchen table and opened the folder I'd been avoiding for months. Estate planning documents, legal papers, the last will and testament I'd drafted but never finalized. 3 months ago, my lawyer, Mr. Patterson, had called to remind me about completing my estate planning. "At your age, Mrs. Rodriguez, it's important to have everything in order," he'd said gently. I'd made the appointment but kept postponing it, telling myself there was no rush. Now I understood why I'd been hesitating. Some part of me knew this day would come. I flipped through the papers, my reading glasses perched on my nose, remembering the conversations with Patterson about my assets, the house, my most valuable possession, the modest savings account, the small life insurance policy. All of it originally designated for Azalea, my only child, my only acknowledged child. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, a woman who'd spent decades believing she had only one daughter, when the truth was far more complicated. I stood up and walked to my bedroom closet, reaching behind the winter coats to retrieve a shoebox I hadn't opened in years. Inside were letters, photographs, and documents I'd kept hidden for nearly 3 decades. The first letter was dated 28 years ago, written in careful Spanish by a woman named Elena Vasquez. My hands trembled as I read words I'd memorized long ago. "Señora Rodriguez, I know this letter may come as a shock, but I believe you have the right to know about Sophia." Sophia, the daughter I'd never been allowed to claim. The story was complicated, painful, and something I'd buried deep to protect everyone involved. 29 years ago, when Azalea was just 6, I'd briefly worked as a live-in caregiver for an elderly man, Miguel Vasquez. His son, Roberto, was going through a bitter divorce, fighting for custody of his 3-year-old daughter, Sophia. During those 6 months, I'd helped care for Sophia while Roberto worked double shifts to afford lawyers. The little girl had no mother figure. Her biological mother had abandoned the family for drugs. I wasn't trying to replace anyone. I was just doing what came naturally, loving a child who needed love. When Roberto finally won custody and moved across the country for a better job, he asked me something that changed both our lives. "Carmen, Sophia loves you. She calls you Abuela. Would you be her grandmother officially? I know it's unusual, but she needs family." I'd said yes without hesitation. We'd made it legal through adoption papers. Sofia Vasquez Rodriguez became my granddaughter in every way that mattered except blood. Roberto sent me pictures, letters, and updates about her life. I'd contributed to her school expenses, her quinceañera, her college fund. But I'd never told Azalea. At 6 years old, Azalea was already jealous of any attention I gave to other children. She'd thrown tantrums when I'd babysat neighbors' kids for extra money. How could I explain that I'd legally adopted another child as my granddaughter? That part of my love, my resources, my heart belonged to someone else, so I'd kept it secret, maintaining 2 separate lives. Azalea knew nothing about Sophia, and Sophia knew nothing about Azalea. It was complicated, perhaps wrong, but it was the choice I'd made to keep peace. Now, reading through Sophia's recent letters, I learned she'd become a teacher, married a good man, and had 2 children of her own. She'd never stopped writing, never stopped calling me Abuela, never stopped expressing gratitude for the love I'd given her. Abuela Carmen, her last letter began, "I hope you know how much your support meant to me growing up. Dad told me you helped pay for my college even when it was hard for you. I teach 2nd grade now. And every day I try to show my students the same kindness you showed me. I set the letter down and wiped my eyes. Here was a granddaughter who appreciated me, who saw my worth, who understood sacrifice. And here was Azalea, treating me like an obligation at her son's baptism. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Azalea's name flashed on the caller ID. "Mom, you left without saying goodbye," she said, her tone more annoyed than concerned. "I said goodbye to Gabriel," I replied quietly. "Marcus's mother asked where you went. It was embarrassing. Embarrassing. Not I was worried or I wanted you to stay. Embarrassing." "Azalea," I said carefully, "how did it feel today, having me there? What do you mean? Did you want me there because you love me or because I helped pay for it?" Silence. Then, "Mom, don't be dramatic. You know we appreciate everything you do. We, not I. Not, I love you, Mom. Not, you're important to us. I need to go," I said softly. "Wait, Mom. Marcus's parents mentioned having dinner next weekend. They want to get to know the family better. Can you bring that enchilada casserole you make?" And there it was, the pattern that had defined our relationship for years. I was useful for cooking, for paying, for contributing, but I wasn't valued for simply existing, for being Azalea's mother, for being Gabriel's grandmother. "I'll let you know," I said, and hung up. I picked up Mr. Patterson's business card from the estate planning folder. Tomorrow was Monday. His office would be open. It was time to make some changes. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that makes difficult decisions feel inevitable. I woke up before my alarm, made my coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with the phone number I'd memorized during a sleepless night. "Patterson and Associates, how may I help you? This is Carmen Rodriguez. I need to see Mr. Patterson today about my estate planning. It's urgent." The secretary paused, probably noting the determination in my voice. "We have an opening at 2 o'clock if that works." "Perfect." I spent the morning gathering documents, not just the estate papers, but the letters from Sophia, photographs, proof of the relationship Azalea never knew existed. By noon, I was dressed in my best outfit again, the same navy dress from Gabriel's baptism. It seemed fitting. Mr. Patterson's office smelled like leather and old books, the kind of place where important decisions were made with proper weight. He was a kind man in his 60s who'd handled my late husband's affairs 15 years ago. "Mrs. Rodriguez," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his mahogany desk. "You sounded quite determined on the phone." "I was humiliated yesterday, Mr. Patterson, by my own daughter, at my grandson's baptism." The words came out steadier than I'd expected. It made me realize something important about my will. I placed Sophia's letters on his desk, watching his eyebrows rise as I explained the situation. 28 years of hidden family, of a granddaughter who'd loved and respected me while my biological daughter treated me like hired help. "This is quite unusual," he said, reading through Sophia's most recent letter. "But not unheard of. You legally adopted her as your granddaughter, so she has every right to inheritance if that's your wish." "It is my wish. I want everything to go to Sophia. The house, the savings, all of it." Mr. Patterson leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I have to ask, are you making this decision out of anger? Estate planning done in emotional moments sometimes leads to regret." I'd anticipated this question. "Mr. Patterson, I've spent 30 years supporting Azalea financially. I paid for her quinceañera, her college education, her wedding, half of yesterday's baptism. In return, she seated me with the custodian and told people I was there because I paid for the party. That's not anger talking. That's clarity. And Sophia? Sophia writes me letters, real letters, not texts asking for money. She tells me about her students, her children, her life. She thanked me for helping with her college expenses, something I never told her I did. She sees me as family, not as a bank account." The paperwork took 2 hours. Mr. Patterson was thorough, making sure I understood every clause, every implication. The house on Maple Street where I'd lived for 40 years would go to Sofia Vasquez Rodriguez. The savings account, the life insurance policy, even my jewelry, all of it. "There's one more thing," I said as we finished. "I want to transfer ownership of the house immediately. Not when I die, now. Can we do that?" Mr. Patterson looked surprised. "That's a significant decision, Mrs. Rodriguez. Where would you live? Sophia mentioned in her last letter that the apartment above her garage is empty. Her children are grown and she could use help with the mortgage. I think it's time I lived somewhere I'm actually wanted. This transfer will have tax implications and your daughter will find out immediately. The county records are public. Good. Let her find out from the county clerk instead of from me. By 5 o'clock, it was done. Sofia Vasquez Rodriguez was now the owner of my house, effective immediately. I'd called her before signing the final papers, explaining everything, about Azalea, about the baptism, about my decision to finally live honestly. Abuela, Sofia had said, her voice thick with emotion. Are you sure? I don't want you to do this because you're hurt, mija. I'm doing this because I'm finally thinking clearly. You've been my granddaughter for 28 years. It's time the world knew it. Then come home. Abuela, come home where you belong. I left Mr. Patterson's office with copies of all the documents in my purse and a strange sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. The walk to my car felt different, not like a 70-year-old woman shuffling through her remaining years, but like someone who'd just taken control of her own story. At home, I called Sophia again to make plans for my move. We talked for an hour about logistics, about her children, about the life I was stepping into. She was excited to convert the garage apartment into a proper home for me, to have me close enough to help with family dinners and homework supervision. The kids have been asking when they'd get to meet their great-grandmother, Sophia said. Miguel is 8 and Isabella is 6. They want to learn how to make tamales from scratch. Great-grandmother. Children who wanted to learn from me, not just receive money from me. As I hung up the phone, I heard a car door slam outside. Through my window, I saw Azalea's BMW parked at an angle across my driveway, as if she'd arrived in a hurry. The pounding on my door started immediately. Mom, open this door right now! I smoothed my skirt, checked my reflection in the hallway mirror, and opened the door with the calmest expression I could manage. Azalea stood there with wild eyes, clutching a piece of paper from the county clerk's office. Her face was flushed, her professional composure completely shattered. What the hell is this? She demanded, waving the paper. It says you transferred the house to someone named Sofia Vasquez Rodriguez. Who is that? What have you done? I stepped aside to let her in, noting how she pushed past me without waiting for permission. The entitlement was so automatic, so ingrained, that she probably didn't even realize she was doing it. Would you like some coffee? I asked politely. Coffee? Are you insane? I want answers. This has to be some kind of mistake. I walked to the kitchen and started making coffee anyway, letting her rage follow me. Sometimes the most powerful response to someone's drama is absolute calm. Mom, are you listening to me? Who is Sofia Vasquez Rodriguez? I turned around slowly, meeting my daughter's panicked eyes. She's your sister. The coffee cup slipped from Azalea's hand, shattering against my kitchen floor. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence that followed my revelation. My what? Her voice was barely a whisper. Your sister. Well, technically your niece, but I've raised her as my granddaughter since she was 3. I reached for the broom, keeping my movements deliberate and calm. Be careful of the glass. Azalea didn't move. She stood frozen in the middle of my kitchen, staring at me like I'd just announced I was an alien. That's impossible. You would have told me. Would I? I swept the broken ceramic into the dustpan, the small task giving me something to focus on besides the shock on my daughter's face. When exactly would have been the right time, Azalea? When you were 6 and threw a tantrum because I gave a Christmas cookie to the neighbor's child? When you were 16 and accused me of loving my job more than you? When you were 30 and only called when you needed money? This isn't real. She was shaking her head, backing toward the doorway. You're making this up to hurt me. I walked to the living room and returned with the shoebox of letters and photographs. I spread them across the kitchen table like evidence in a court case. 28 years of Sophia's life documented in pictures, letters, school reports, and legal documents. Here's Sophia at her high school graduation. Here's her wedding invitation. She wanted me to walk her down the aisle since her father had passed away by then. Here's a picture of her children, Miguel and Isabella, your nephew and niece. Azalea picked up a recent photo with trembling hands. Sophia was beautiful, with warm brown eyes and a genuine smile, holding 2 children who looked remarkably like Azalea had at their age. She's a teacher, I continued, my voice steady. Second grade, she makes lesson plans at her kitchen table the same way you used to do homework. She bakes cookies for school fundraisers and coaches her daughter's soccer team. She writes me letters every month, real letters on paper, because she says it's more personal than email. Why? Azalea's voice cracked. Why her and not me? The question hung in the air like smoke. I poured myself coffee, noting how my hands weren't shaking anymore. Yesterday's humiliation had burned away something fragile in me, leaving behind something harder, clearer. Because she appreciates me, Azalea. Because when I helped pay for her college, she thanked me every semester. Because when I sent her $20 for her birthday when money was tight, she wrote a 3-page letter about how she used it to buy books for her classroom. Because she sees me as family, not as a bank account. I appreciate you. Azalea's voice was rising, taking on the desperate tone I remembered from her teenage years. You know I do. Do you? I sat down across from her, meeting her eyes directly. When's the last time you called me just to talk? Not to ask for money, not to invite me to something where you needed my help. Just to talk? Silence. When's the last time you asked how I'm feeling? How my arthritis is doing? Whether I'm lonely in this house by myself? More silence. Yesterday, at Gabriel's baptism, you seated me with the custodian and told people I was there because I paid for the party. Sophia would have saved me the seat next to her and introduced me as her beloved grandmother. Azalea was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? Marcus's family has money, Mom. Real money. I was trying to fit in. There it was. The truth I'd suspected, but never wanted to acknowledge. Azalea was ashamed of me. Ashamed of my modest apartment, my discount store clothes, my heavily accented English that came out stronger when I was nervous. And fitting in was more important than honoring your mother? You don't understand the pressure I'm under. She was standing now, pacing my small kitchen like a caged animal. Marcus's mother wears designer everything. She has a housekeeper and belongs to the country club. I can't show up to these events with your poor Mexican mother? The words landed like a slap. Azalea's face went white, then red. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Sophia's most recent pictures. Look at this photo from Sophia's last family barbecue. She's introducing me to her neighbors as my wonderful abuela who helped raise me. She's proud of me, Azalea. She doesn't need me to be anyone other than who I am. I showed her the picture. Sophia with her arm around me, both of us laughing at something one of the children had said. I was wearing a simple floral dress and my comfortable shoes, my gray hair in a neat bun. Nothing fancy, nothing impressive by Marcus's family's standards, but Sophia's love was written all over her face. She doesn't need you to be wealthy or sophisticated or connected, I continued. She needs you to be family, something you've forgotten how to be. Azalea sank into a chair, her head in her hands. What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? Fine, I'm sorry. I don't want your sorry, mija. It's too late for that. Her head snapped up. What do you mean, too late? I mean, I'm done. I'm moving to Denver to live with Sophia and her family. The house is hers now, legally and permanently. My will has been changed. Everything goes to her when I die. You can't do this. Azalea was on her feet again. Panic replacing anger. This house has been in our family for 40 years. Gabriel's inheritance. Gabriel has 2 sets of grandparents who can leave him inheritances. Sophia's children have me. What about me? What about my son? Your grandson? I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 70 years, but also feeling stronger than I had in decades. You made your choice yesterday, Azalea. You chose Marcus's family's approval over your mother's dignity. You chose to treat me like hired help at my own grandson's baptism. Actions have consequences. Please, Mom, don't do this. I'll change, I promise. No, you won't. And you know what? I don't need you to anymore. The doorbell rang, saving us both from whatever came next. Through the window, I could see Sophia's rental car in my driveway. She'd caught the first flight from Denver after our conversation yesterday. That's Sophia, I said, smoothing my hair. She came to help me pack. Azalea's face went through a series of emotions. Shock, jealousy, fear, rage. I'm not done talking about this. Yes, you are. I walked toward the front door, then paused. There's one more thing you should know, Azalea, about Gabriel's father. She froze. What about Marcus? Ask him about a woman named Rebecca Chen. Ask him about the hotel receipts from last month's business trip to Seattle. I opened the door before she could respond, leaving her standing in my kitchen with her mouth open and her world falling apart. Sophia stood on my doorstep with her arms open, and for the first time in years, I stepped into an embrace that felt like coming home. Sophia's embrace was everything Azalea's hugs had never been. Warm, genuine, without any hidden agenda. She held me for a long moment on my doorstep before pulling back to study my face with concerned brown eyes. Abuela, are you all right? You sounded so upset on the phone. I'm better now that you're here, mija. Behind us, I heard Azalea's sharp intake of breath. I turned to see her standing in the hallway, staring at Sophia with a mixture of shock and something that looked dangerously close to hatred. So this is her, Azalea said, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. The daughter you chose over me. Sophia looked confused, glancing between us. Abuela, what's happening? Sophia, meet Azalea, my biological daughter. Azalea, this is Sophia, my chosen granddaughter and the woman who now owns this house. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Sophia stepped forward with her hand extended, clearly trying to bridge whatever gap existed between us. It's nice to finally meet you, Sophia said warmly. Abuela has told me so much about you over the years. Azalea ignored the offered handshake. Has she? Funny, because she never mentioned you to me, not once in 28 years. Azalea, I warned, but Sophia held up a gentle hand. I understand this must be shocking, Sophia said, her teacher's voice calm and measured. I can't imagine learning about a family member this way, but maybe we could… Could what? Bond over how my mother abandoned me for someone else's child? I never abandoned you, I said firmly. I supported you financially and emotionally for 35 years. You're the one who chose distance. Because you were never really there. Azalea's composure finally cracked completely. Even when you were physically present, you were emotionally absent. Now I know why. You were saving all your real love for her. Sophia's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. Azalea, that's not true. Abuela talked about you constantly when I was growing up. She was so proud when you got into college, when you became a nurse, when you got married. She showed me pictures. Pictures? Azalea laughed bitterly. She showed you pictures of my life while keeping you a complete secret from me. That's not love. That's compartmentalization. The accusation stung because it contained a grain of truth. I had compartmentalized, had kept my two daughters in separate worlds to avoid conflict. But as I watched Sophia's face fall, I realized I needed to tell the whole truth. Sit down, both of you, I said, settling into my worn armchair. It's time you knew everything. I told them about Azalea's childhood jealousy, about the tantrums whenever I showed attention to other children. I explained how, at 6 years old, Azalea had once hidden my reading glasses so I couldn't help the neighbor's daughter with homework. How she'd thrown such violent fits about sharing me that I'd learned to keep my caregiving work separate from our home life. When Roberto asked me to be Sophia's grandmother, I was afraid, I admitted. Afraid that if Azalea knew, she'd force me to choose. And I couldn't choose. So I chose silence. You could have prepared me, Azalea said, but her anger was cooling into something more vulnerable. You could have helped me understand. Could I have? When you were 16 and accused me of loving my job more than you? When you stopped calling me unless you needed money? When you moved in with Marcus's family and only invited me to events where my cooking or my checkbook was required? Sophia was quiet, processing everything. Finally, she spoke. Abuela, the receipts you mentioned, about Gabriel's father? I looked at Azalea, seeing the fear creeping into her eyes. 3 weeks ago, Marcus called me by mistake. His phone misdialed while he was talking to someone about meeting Rebecca at the usual hotel. He didn't realize I could hear everything. Azalea's face went white. That's impossible. He mentioned her by name, described her appearance, talked about how his wife, you, had no idea about their arrangement. He said it had been going on for over a year. You're lying. But Azalea's voice was shaking. I pulled out my phone and showed her the call log. 23 minutes, 3 weeks ago. I recorded the conversation after I realized what I was hearing. Would you like me to play it? No. The word came out strangled. Sophia reached over and took Azalea's hand, surprising both of us. I'm sorry. This must be devastating. Azalea jerked her hand away. Don't touch me. This is all your fault somehow. How is Marcus's infidelity Sophia's fault? I asked. Because if you hadn't been distracted by your perfect replacement daughter, maybe you would have been available when I needed someone to talk to about my marriage problems. The accusation was so illogical, so desperate, that it almost made me sad. Almost. When did you try to talk to me about marriage problems, Azalea? When did you call me for advice or support that wasn't financial? Silence. You didn't, I continued, because you never saw me as someone who could offer emotional support. You saw me as someone who could offer money, cooking, and occasional babysitting. You never wanted my wisdom or my love, just my resources. My phone rang, interrupting the heavy silence. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. Answer it, I said to Azalea. He's probably wondering where you are. She stared at the phone as it rang, her face cycling through emotions. When it went to voicemail, I played the message on speaker. Carmen, this is Marcus. Azalea's been gone for hours, and she's not answering her phone. If she's there, tell her she needs to come home. We have guests coming for dinner, and I need her to cook. A pause. Also, what's this nonsense about you transferring your house? Azalea's hysterical about some property records. Call me back. The entitlement in his voice was staggering. Not, is my wife okay? Or, I'm worried about Azalea. Just demands and dismissal of my legal right to do what I wanted with my own property. He doesn't even sound concerned about you, Sophia observed quietly. Azalea was crying now, silent tears that seemed to wash away years of pretense. What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? You could start by talking to Marcus honestly, I suggested. Ask him about Rebecca. Ask him about his future plans. Ask him if he sees you as a partner or as domestic help. And if he admits to cheating? Then you'll know where you stand. Just like I know where I stand with you. Sophia stood up, brushing off her jeans. Abuela, should I go to the hotel? Give you two some privacy? No, mija, stay. Azalea was just leaving. Azalea looked up sharply. Just like that? You're dismissing me? You dismissed me first. Yesterday in front of everyone who mattered to you. She stood slowly, gathering her purse and the property documents. At the door, she turned back one last time. When you change your mind about this ridiculous house transfer, don't expect me to make it easy for you. I won't change my mind. We'll see. After she left, Sophia and I sat in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, she spoke. She's hurting, Abuela. Yes, she is, but that's not my responsibility anymore. And Gabriel, your grandson? I sighed, feeling the weight of that loss. If Azalea chooses to keep him from me, that's her choice, but I won't sacrifice my dignity to see him. Sophia nodded, understanding in a way that Azalea never had. Miguel and Isabella are excited to meet their great-grandmother. They've been practicing Spanish phrases to surprise you. For the first time in days, I smiled genuinely. Then let's go home, mija. Let's go home. 18 months later, I was kneeling in Sophia's garden, teaching 8-year-old Miguel how to transplant tomato seedlings when my phone rang. The name on the screen made my hands pause in the rich Colorado soil. Azalea. Aren't you going to answer it, Abuela? Isabella asked, looking up from the marigolds she was planting in careful rows. Not right now. Mija, the plants need our attention. It was the first call in 6 months. For a while after our confrontation, Azalea had called weekly, sometimes angry, sometimes pleading, always demanding that I fix this mess by transferring the house back to her. I'd stopped answering after the 3rd call where she screamed that I was a bitter old woman destroying her family. The irony wasn't lost on me. She accused me of destroying her family while her husband's affair had already done that job quite thoroughly. Through mutual acquaintances, I'd heard fragments of Azalea's story over the past year and a half. Marcus had initially denied the affair, then admitted to it. then blamed Azalea for driving him to it by being too demanding and emotional. The divorce had been bitter. Marcus's family, who'd once embraced Azalea for her beauty and nursing career, quickly closed ranks around their son and his new girlfriend, Rebecca Chen, as it turned out. Azalea had kept the apartment but lost the lifestyle. No more country club events, no more designer clothes, no more vacation photos designed to impress social media followers. She'd moved back to work full-time at the hospital, taking extra shifts to make ends meet. "Abuela," Miguel said, carefully pressing soil around a tiny tomato plant. "Why do people hurt each other on purpose?" The question came out of nowhere, the way children's profound observations often do. I glanced at Sophia, who was weeding nearby but clearly listening. "What makes you ask that, mijo? Yesterday at school, Tyler said his mom and dad don't love each other anymore, and they're going to live in different houses. But if they don't love each other, why did they have Tyler?" I sat back on my heels, considering how to answer. At 71, I'd learned that the most important lessons couldn't be simplified into easy explanations. "Sometimes people think love means different things," I said finally. "Some people think love means never being angry or sad. Some people think love means getting everything they want. But real love means accepting people exactly as they are and choosing to care for them anyway. Like how you moved here to live with us? Like how Sophia invited me to be part of your family, even though she already had a complete family without me." Miguel nodded solemnly, then brightened. "And like how you're teaching us to make tamales even though we're terrible at folding the corn husks," I laughed, remembering last weekend's kitchen disaster. "Practice makes better, not perfect." My phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. Despite my resolve, curiosity got the better of me. I wiped my hands on my gardening apron and played the message. "Mom." Azalea's voice was different, quieter, less demanding. "I know you probably won't call me back, but I wanted you to know that Gabriel took his first steps yesterday. He's 14 months old now, walking and getting into everything." A pause. "I thought you'd want to know." The message was only 30 seconds long, but it contained something I hadn't heard from Azalea in years. Simple sharing without an agenda. No requests for money, no guilt trips, no demands. Just a mother telling her own mother about her child's milestone. "Good news?" Sophia asked, noting my expression. "Gabriel's walking." "That's wonderful. Are you going to call her back?" I looked around Sophia's backyard. My backyard now. Really. The children's laughter filled the air as they argued good-naturedly about whose flowers would grow taller. Sophia's husband, David, was grilling dinner on the patio, while Sophia organized the garden tools with the efficiency of someone who genuinely enjoyed creating order. This was home. This was family. This was what love looked like when it wasn't conditional on your usefulness or your ability to meet other people's expectations. "Maybe," I said finally. "But not today." That evening, after the children were in bed, and Sophia and David had settled in to watch their evening show, I sat on the small porch attached to my garage apartment and called the number I'd memorized but never used. "Roberto, it's Carmen." "Carmen, how are you? Sophia told me you've moved to Denver. How are you settling in?" Roberto's voice was warm, familiar. Even after his father's death 5 years ago, we'd maintained contact. He was Sophia's father, after all, and I was her chosen grandmother. The relationship had evolved into something like friendship over the decades. "I'm well, very well, actually. The children are wonderful, and Sophia, she's everything you raised her to be. She gets that from you too, you know. The way she cares for people, the way she sees the best in everyone. She learned that from watching you." We talked for an hour about ordinary things, his work, Sophia's teaching, the children's school activities, normal family conversation, the kind I'd never quite managed with Azalea. As I was preparing to hang up, Roberto said something that stopped me. "Carmen, Sophia mentioned that your biological daughter has been struggling since her divorce. I know it's complicated, but if you ever want to bring her here for a visit, to meet Sophia properly, well, family is family. There's always room for more love." The generosity in his offer nearly brought me to tears. Here was a man offering to welcome my estranged daughter into his family circle. Not because he owed me anything, but because he understood that love multiplies rather than divides. Thank you, Roberto. That means more than you know. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness, listening to the sounds of my new neighborhood. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A teenager's music drifted from an open window. Normal sounds of normal life. My phone was still in my hand. Azalea's number was still in my contacts. I thought about Gabriel taking his first steps, probably reaching for something just out of his grasp, determined to get there on his own. I thought about Azalea, perhaps watching him with the same mixture of pride and terror that all mothers feel when their children start walking away from them. I thought about 18 months of silence, of wounded pride on both sides, of a grandmother missing her grandson's milestones, and a daughter learning what it meant to navigate life without a safety net. Then I thought about Sophia teaching my replacement for Azalea's quinceañera dress when she was 15, working extra shifts to afford something beautiful for a girl who wasn't even blood-related. I thought about all the ways love had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with choice. My fingers hovered over Azalea's number for a long moment. Then I closed the phone and stood up. Some bridges could be rebuilt, but only when both sides were ready to meet in the middle. Azalea's message was a first step, but it was still just that, a first step. She would need to take many more before I was willing to walk toward her. In the meantime, I had a life to live. A real life, with people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. I went inside to help Sophia prepare tomorrow's lesson plans, and for the first time in decades, I felt completely at peace with my choices. The phone stayed silent for the rest of the evening, and that was exactly how I wanted it. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.